isn't the experience of just being identified with a separate personality, isn't it rather limiting? Isn't it the cause of our psychological suffering? Isn't it a kind of ongoing sort of personal drama? And some days we're up, and some days we're down. And when we believe ourselves to be an isolated, separate personality, we are always seeking for happiness, for peace, for fulfillment. Isn't that true? So all human beings are seeking peace, happiness and fulfillment. But because the human predicament is that we identify ourselves with being an isolated body-mind, then we seek for this fulfillment, for peace, happiness, outside ourselves. Right? So pretty much everybody in some form or another is seeking completion, seeking happiness in material things, in relationships, in activities. Okay, and in that seeking, our attention, our consciousness is being drawn out into the world of objects, let's say. So we presume that I am a separate, isolated entity in this often hostile and intimidating world. And if I'm going to discover happiness, if I'm going to discover peace, I need to fulfill myself through objects, relationships, and activity. And this is pretty much what most of the human race is busy with. But for some of us, we get to a point in our evolution where we begin to recognize that that's not actually where we're going to find lasting peace, fulfillment, and happiness. Why is that? Because we recognize that all of the things and all of the beings, everything out that seems to be out there, is always changing. As the Buddha said, everything is impermanent. So even if we achieve, even if we get the object of our desire, right, whether it's the new car, or what seems to be the perfect woman or the perfect man, or even if we have the most amazing mystical experience, the most amazing love and light bliss experience, eventually things change, don't they? Things change. People change, things change, our desires change. And every experience that we can have has a beginning and has an ending in time. Does it make sense so far? So then for some of us, when we become, we start to get to a point maybe where we've suffered enough, or we just, for some people there's just an intuition that the peace, the happiness, the freedom that I'm longing for is not going to be found out there. And this is really the turning point, or you could say the beginning of spiritual life. And so then you could say we start to turn within. And we start to become attracted to things like meditation and various spiritual teachings. But then usually what happens, and this is all part of the process, is instead of seeking for happiness and fulfillment in objects, relationships and activities out there, we start seeking it in higher and deeper states of consciousness that appear to be in here. Okay? So then we might do various spiritual practices and take part in various spiritual activities through which we start to experience a higher state of joy, of bliss, of expansion. Okay? So there's a whole variety of possibilities, and I'm sure many of you have experienced them. If you go on a meditation retreat, if you do certain practices for long enough, intensely enough, you can experience what we could call spiritual experiences, where you go beyond your mind, beyond your body. Maybe you experience light, maybe you experience bliss. But eventually, at some point, all of these, let's call them mystical experiences, also fade away. And then we're usually left back with our separate sense of self, feeling like, oh, I lost it. And then we go back on the retreat, or we sit on our meditation cushion again, and we're like, okay, I've got to get that back. That just felt so good. And of course, you see, then we're still locked into this cycle of seeking, wanting. And this whole pattern of spiritual seeking, of course, is being fed by this enormous alternative spiritual marketplace that is available to us today. Because in our time, we have access to all these practices and wisdom teachings from all that around the world. We all have it at our fingertips. So what often happens is we give up. We see through the search for happiness through materialism, but often we start to become spiritual materialists, and we start shopping and going to this workshop and that retreat and humming this mantra and hopping from one thing to another. Of course, this probably doesn't apply to any of you.